Every morning, you wake up telling yourself today will be different, but by noon, something small pulls you back into the same old pattern you know too well. Stay with me until the end, because what happens to this man will show you exactly why small choices shape everything in your life. Marcus was 32 years old and worked as a project coordinator at a mid-sized construction firm in a city he had lived in all his life. He had a wife named Elena and a 7-year-old daughter named Sophie, who loved drawing colorful pictures for him and leaving them on the kitchen table every single morning. On the surface, his life looked stable and comfortable enough to envy, with a steady job, a nice home, and a family that loved him despite his flaws. But there was one habit eating away at the foundation of everything he built, slowly destroying the trust people once had in him, without him even noticing it happening. Marcus could never arrive anywhere on time, not to work meetings, not to family dinners, not even to his daughter's school events that she begged him to attend. It started years ago, with just 5 or 10 minutes of delay here and there, small enough that people would forgive him and move on without saying much. Over time, those minutes grew into 20, then 30, sometimes an entire hour late, and the excuses became longer and more creative with each passing month and year. He always had an excuse ready in his mind before he even walked through the door, rehearsing it silently so it would sound believable and beyond his control. Traffic was bad. His alarm didn't go off. He had to finish one last email. Someone called him right as he was leaving. The list went on endlessly. But the truth was simpler and harder to admit than any excuse he could create, and it lived quietly in the back of his mind where he refused to look. He never left early enough because he always believed he had more time than he did, constantly underestimating how long things would take and overestimating his ability to rush. At work, his coworkers stopped relying on him for time-sensitive tasks, slowly removing him from projects that required punctuality and teamwork, replacing him with people they could count on without worry. His boss started assigning him projects with loose deadlines and less visibility, quietly managing him out of opportunities that could have led to promotions and greater responsibility within the company. Marcus noticed the shift, but told himself it didn't matter as long as he got the work done eventually, convincing himself that results were more important than timing or reliability. At home, the damage cut deeper and quieter, slipping into the small moments that make up a marriage and a childhood, eroding the foundation of trust brick by brick. Elena stopped asking him to join her for morning walks because he was always running late, and she got tired of waiting by the door with her shoes on. Sophie stopped showing him her drawings right away because he was never fully present when he arrived, always distracted by his phone or rushing to catch up on something he missed. One evening, Elena sat across from him at the kitchen table with her arms crossed, her face calm, but her eyes filled with a sadness he had never seen before. She didn't yell or cry. She just looked tired, like someone who had been carrying a heavy weight for too long and couldn't hold it anymore without saying something honest. She said she felt like she was raising Sophie alone, even though he lived in the same house, slept in the same bed, and sat at the same table every night. Marcus promised he would change, and he meant it in that moment, feeling the weight of her words pressing down on his chest and making it hard to breathe. But the next morning, he was late again, rushing out the door with the same excuses on his lips, as if the conversation from the night before had never happened. Then came the day that broke something inside him, a day that started like any other, but ended with a quiet pain he would carry for the rest of his life. Sophie had been chosen to receive a small award at her school assembly for her artwork, a certificate and a moment on stage that meant everything to her young heart. She reminded him about it every single day for 2 weeks, asking him each morning at breakfast if he remembered and if he promised he would be there to see her. She made him promise 3 times that he would be there sitting in the front row, holding up 3 fingers and making him swear on her favorite stuffed animal that he wouldn't miss it. Marcus swore on everything he loved that he wouldn't miss it, looking into her hopeful eyes and feeling certain that this time would be different from all the other times before. The assembly started at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday, and Sophie had told him that parents were supposed to arrive early to get good seats near the stage. Marcus planned to leave work at 9:30, giving himself plenty of time to arrive early, sit in the front row, and watch his daughter receive her award with pride. But at 9:15, his phone buzzed with a work email marked urgent, and he made the choice that would haunt him for years without even realizing its weight. He told himself he could handle it quickly and still leave on time. Just a few minutes to read it and send a reply. Then he would rush out. 20 minutes passed before he looked up from his screen, and the panic hit him like a wave as he realized what he had done once again to someone he loved. He grabbed his keys and rushed to the car, telling himself he could still make it if he drove fast and caught the lights, repeating it like a prayer. Traffic was heavier than usual, and every red light felt like a personal attack, like the universe was conspiring to teach him a lesson he didn't want to learn. He arrived at the school at 10:17 and ran toward the auditorium, his heart pounding in his chest and his shirt damp with sweat from running across the parking lot. When he opened the door, the ceremony was already finished, and parents were standing around chatting while children ran in circles holding their certificates and laughing with their friends and families. Marcus scanned the room and saw Sophie sitting alone on a bench near the stage, holding her award in both hands and staring down at it with no expression. She was holding her award in both hands, staring down at it with no expression on her face, not smiling, not crying, just sitting there in a silence that felt heavier than anger. He walked over and knelt in front of her, trying to smile, reaching out to touch her shoulder. But she didn't look up at him right away like she usually did. She looked up at him and asked why he didn't come, her voice so small and quiet that it felt like a knife sliding between his ribs and stopping just short of his heart. He started to explain, but she just nodded slowly and looked back down, accepting his brokenness. The way children do when they've learned not to expect more from the people who should protect them. She didn't cry or yell. She just went quiet in a way that hurt more than anything. And he knew in that moment he had damaged something precious that might never fully heal. That night, Marcus sat alone in his car outside the house for nearly an hour, unable to walk through the door and face his family, replaying the look on Sophie's face over and over. He realized this wasn't about traffic or bad luck or poor planning anymore. It was about who he was becoming and what he was teaching his daughter, about promises, love, and whether words meant anything. The next morning, he arrived at work early for the first time in months, sitting in the empty parking lot and watching the sun rise, feeling like a stranger in his own life. In the break room, he saw an older man named Raymond who worked in facility management, a quiet man with gray hair and calm eyes that seemed to notice everything without judgment. They had spoken a few times before, but never about anything personal, just polite greetings and small talk about the weather or the coffee machine that never worked properly in the mornings. Marcus didn't know why, but he felt the need to say something honest, to confess to someone who wouldn't try to fix him or tell him everything would be fine. He told Raymond he kept letting people down and didn't know how to stop, and the words came out heavier than he expected, like stones he had been carrying in his chest. Raymond listened without interrupting, and then asked one simple question that cut through all the noise and excuses Marcus had built up over the years, like walls around his own failure. He asked Marcus what time he usually decided to leave for something important, leaning back against the counter and waiting patiently for an answer he probably already knew before asking the question. Marcus said he decided right before he needed to leave, in the moment when urgency took over, and panic pushed him out the door without preparation or margin for error. Raymond nodded and said that was the problem, speaking slowly and carefully, like someone who had learned this lesson the hard way and didn't want anyone else to pay the same price. He explained that discipline isn't about willpower in the moment. It's about deciding the night before, making the choice when your mind is calm and the pressure hasn't arrived yet to cloud your judgment. He told Marcus to pick his leave time the evening prior and treat it like an appointment with himself, one that was just as important as any meeting with a boss or client. Raymond said he learned this years ago after losing people he loved because he always ran out of time, and his voice cracked slightly when he said it, revealing old wounds still tender. He said, "Time doesn't wait for explanations, and neither do the people who matter. And once trust is broken, it takes 10 times the effort to rebuild what carelessness destroyed in seconds." Marcus felt something shift inside him as he listened, like a door opening in a room he didn't know existed, letting light into a darkness he had grown too comfortable living in. That night, he sat down with a notebook and wrote down every commitment he had for the next week, from work meetings to picking up Sophie from school to date night with Elena. Next to each one, he wrote the exact time he would leave and what he needed to prepare the night before, laying out clothes, packing bags, charging his phone, setting multiple alarms. It felt strange and almost childish at first, but he committed to trying, knowing that if he didn't change now, he would lose everything that mattered before he even realized it was gone. The first few days were harder than he expected, requiring him to say no to things he would normally say yes to and leave tasks unfinished when his mind screamed at him. He had to ignore emails, decline last-minute requests, and leave tasks unfinished, watching opportunities slip by and feeling the discomfort of not being available to everyone all the time, like he used to be. His mind screamed at him that he was being irresponsible and missing opportunities, that people would think less of him, that he was letting his career slip through his fingers by choosing strictness over flexibility. But he kept his promise to himself and left exactly when he planned, walking out the door even when his body resisted and his thoughts tried to convince him to stay just 5 more minutes. He arrived on time to a client meeting and saw the surprise on his boss's face, a look of shock mixed with something that might have been respect or relief, or both. He picked Sophie up from school early one day, and she smiled wider than she had in weeks, running to him with her backpack bouncing and her arms open like he was a hero. Elena noticed too, and didn't say anything, but her eyes softened when she looked at him, a quiet acknowledgement that something was different, that maybe this time the change was real and not just words. Then came the real test, the moment that would prove whether the new habits had taken root or if they were just surface changes that would crumble under pressure and return him to old patterns. Marcus had a major project presentation scheduled for Friday morning at 9, with a client whose business could change the trajectory of the entire company and secure his position for years to come. The client was important, and his boss made it clear this could open new doors for the company. possibly even lead to a promotion if Marcus showed up prepared and confident and on time. Thursday night, Marcus prepared his materials and decided he would leave home at 7:30, giving himself a full hour buffer to arrive calm and ready without rushing or sweating or apologizing for being late. That would give him a full hour buffer to arrive calm and ready, time to review his notes, grab coffee, make adjustments if needed, and walk into the room like someone in control of his life. Friday morning, his alarm went off at 6, and he felt the old urge to stay in bed, to hit snooze just once, to steal a few more minutes of comfort before facing the world. But he got up, showered, and dressed without hesitation, moving through the morning routine he had planned the night before, like a soldier, following orders he gave to his future self when his mind was clear. At 7, he received a text from his boss asking for a last-minute change to the presentation. Something small but urgent that would normally send him into a spiral of panic and rushed corrections. The old Marcus would have rushed to fix it and left late, spiraling into stress and arriving flustered and apologizing, reinforcing the image everyone had of him as unreliable and scattered no matter how good his work was. Instead, he replied that he would adjust it on site and stuck to his 7:30 departure, trusting that the buffer he built into his morning would absorb this unexpected request without breaking his plan. On the drive, his car made a strange noise, and he had to pull over briefly to check it, his heart pounding as the old panic tried to take over and tell him everything was falling apart. His heart pounded, but he had time and didn't panic, breathing slowly and remembering that he had planned for exactly this kind of obstacle. That margin wasn't wasted time, but protection against the unexpected chaos of life. He arrived at the office at 8:20 and calmly made the changes his boss requested, sitting in the conference room alone with his laptop and a cup of coffee, feeling a strange new sensation he realized was peace. When the client walked in at 9, Marcus was standing ready with confidence he hadn't felt in years, his materials organized, his mind clear, his body relaxed, because he had done everything right leading up to this moment. The presentation went smoothly, and the client signed the contract that same afternoon, shaking hands and complimenting not just the proposal, but the professionalism and preparation Marcus had brought to the meeting. Something they said was rare these days. His boss shook his hand and said he'd been waiting to see this version of Marcus show up, the version he always knew was in there, but had given up expecting to actually see consistently. But the bigger victory came that evening when he walked through the door at exactly the time he told Elena he would be home. Not an hour late with apologies, but right on time, like a promise kept. Sophie ran to him when he walked through the door and asked if he wanted to see her new drawing, her eyes bright with excitement instead of the dull resignation he had seen too many times. He sat down on the floor with her and gave her his full attention, turning off his phone and looking at every detail she pointed out, asking questions and listening, like her words were the most important thing. Elena watched from the kitchen doorway and smiled, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed loosely, not in anger, but in something that looked like hope mixed with cautious belief that this might actually last. Later that night, she told him she was proud of him, not because of the work success, but because he kept showing up, because she could feel him becoming present again in their lives. Not because of the work success, but because he kept showing up, proving with actions instead of words that he was choosing them over convenience, over excuses, over the comfort of his old broken patterns. Marcus realized the smallest shift in his daily discipline had changed everything, that leaving 15 minutes earlier wasn't just about time management, but about who he decided to be when no one was watching, and the choice was his alone. Leaving 15 minutes earlier didn't just save time, it saved trust. It gave him back his presence, his word, and his ability to be the father and husband he wanted to be instead of the ghost who disappointed everyone. It gave him back his presence, his word, and his ability to be the father and husband he wanted to be. The man he saw in his mind when he imagined his best self instead of the one. He understood now that life doesn't fall apart because of one big failure, but crumbles slowly through 1,000 small compromises we make with ourselves when we think no one is counting or keeping score of our broken promises. It crumbles slowly through 1,000 small compromises we make with ourselves, each one feeling small enough to justify, but together, building a mountain of distance between who we are and who we claim to want to be. And it rebuilds the same way. One kept promise at a time, one early departure, one moment of presence, one choice to honor your word when it would be easier to break it and hope no one notices. If this story stirred something in you, subscribe and let it be the sign you needed to start today to make one small choice that could change everything if you just keep choosing it again tomorrow.